Welcome back to Student Hub Live. This session is about fitting study into my life, not life into my study. And I'm joined by two people who know a lot about this. Kieran McCartney, who has been studying very, very hard and has just completed his EdD. And Sarah Jones, who is currently an OU student, studying primary education at level 3. And also you're a busy mum of 2 and an Open University Students Association rep for Wellbeing Education and Language Studies. And Kieran, you're also a staff tutor, so you oversee loads of students and associate lecturers.
Yeah, I'm also a lecturer as well as being a student here.
Okay, so this is perfect. So you've got lots of things.
Loads of experience.
So how do you fit all the study in? Okay, so we're going to talk about that today. And the one thing that you both said when we were sort of bringing this question to you was it is a holistic approach.
Yeah, definitely.
Very much so. It's very much a balancing act. It's trying to work with your family and your friends and making sure that you also take time out for yourself, and it's all those things, all the aspects of your life, and just trying to build in where you can study, when you can study, how you can study. It's very much a holistic approach, definitely.
And it's all about finding clever uses of time, isn't it? We were talking a bit about that earlier, and I know lots of people in the chat have been talking about how they're working nights and things. Like Joe, we've just joined you on our hot desk. Welcome. You work in our student support team as well, so you can give loads of advice to people and tell them what the student support team does as well. And how's everyone doing at home?
They're all doing really well. We're finding out what people are studying as they're coming back into the chat. So we know Davin is doing his MSc in computer science, and he's 3 months away from graduating, so he's very excited. He was an undergraduate OU student, and then is doing distance learning with another university as well. So he's putting his OU study to good use and following his interests. And Kate's doing philosophy and psychological research. It sounds really cool.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Right, so how do you both manage this balancing act? Sarah, you were saying, it's about finding different things, doing sort of different things at the same time. What do you do that works for you?
It's things like, because I've got 2 small children, and it's about trying to fit my study in around what they do. So half term is always a challenge. So what I do is okay, today I'm going to work, but this is how I'm going to work. So I set a timer and I work for 30 minutes, then I have 5 minutes, and they come to me with their questions in those 5 minutes, then I set it again. I would do that several times, and then I have a good 20 minutes off where I walk away from my desk and I go and spend time with them. And then the next day, we do something together. So it's all about this trade-off with them. And they've worked out that actually it's quite cool, and sometimes they come and sit at the table with me and do stuff, and whether it's work that they've got to do for school or whether it's reading or whatever, but they come to the table and they sit with me and do it, which is really nice to share that time with them, but they know that I'm studying, so it's about balancing with them.
I
really.
bet that's teaching them some really key things, because so often if I sit down with my daughter and say, right, let's do your homework, all of a sudden it's, why don't we blah? I'm just going to get, and then all of a sudden this thing that could be a 10-minute task turns into an hour thing, and before we know it, we've decided to, do the shopping and various other things because we've run out of milk or whatever, and you get completely distracted.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're setting a good example for them. How do they react to this?
On the whole, okay. I mean, there's always times that it's not going to work, and then you just have to go, okay, let's just move on. But on the whole, it is setting a good example for them, and that's part of me studying is to do that, is to set a good example, to show to them that actually you just got to take your chances. You've got to go with it, and sometimes things don't work out, but it's how you move on from that. And it's showing them all these kinds of life skills, and they may not think they're learning very much, but they're learning loads.
Because they're not just learning that mummy can do it, they're learning that mummy can manage her time, and that also they can manage their time. And I bet you get better quality of questions when you've only got 5 minutes than you would.
Absolutely. It's not drawn out, because they know they've got that 5 minutes and that's what they've got. And it sounds really mean, but actually it works for me really well. Yeah, really well.
You've had some ingenious ways of involving your children.
I have, indeed, actually.
Which I thought were excellent.
Thanks. I should note, actually, I'm wearing a new aftershave today. It's called Procrastination by SST. First thing I'd say is that for students who are listening to this, the most important thing is to change your mindset before you get your children involved. And part of that is, and you touched on this, Sarah, is not feeling guilty about wanting to or having to study. Because you're doing it for self-development, and when you do that too, it's about, when you get a qualification, you're more likely to have a stable job, and that benefits your children.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, some of the things that I've done is my son was in year 7 at the time, and I was doing a master's degree. This is before GDPR really kicked in, and I had some interview transcriptions audio recordings. I wanted them transcribed, but my 7-year-old son was having a problem in school in that he was really good at English, but really bad at the detail. So what I did was I got him to listen to the recordings and type them out on a computer for me. So he transcribed them. Yeah. Obviously, keeping GDPR and that in mind.
And you did pay him a minimum wage.
I did.
Yeah.
I paid,
Which was also impressive.
Exactly. So I paid him something like £6 an hour. He was only 10 or 11. But then I did demos. You have to double check that. So I would compare it, listening back and listening to it. Yeah. And he even put in, it was like really good for him because he put in the commas and stuff and the apostrophes, which I'm awful at. Yeah. And so I just checked it against it. But that was one thing that helped to develop him. Yeah. But it also created an awareness, as Sarah touched on there too, about he said, oh, this is what you're doing when you're studying. Because sometimes he would mix up that when I was working at home, he would think I was working and studying. Yeah. So he had a very clear idea, and I'd tell him why I was doing it as well. Yeah. Yeah. But he really got him involved in his English. Ended up, I'm not saying it was all down to me, but it did help him improve.
So it's about, I guess, taking a step back. And sometimes, as you say, when you're really stressed and you feel like this is my time, it's my luxury. It's not always a luxury. It's something that if it matters to you and your family, and you've all agreed that that's the way that you're going to do things, then you need that time. Yeah.
I mean, like this weekend, I had a TMA due, and I was really struggling to get it all organised, and it was really stressing me out. Yeah. But my husband kind of stepped in and went, right, send me what you've got, let's have a look at it together. Yeah. And we sat down together, and we looked at it and went, do you know, you have actually got an essay here. Yeah. You just need to organise it better. Yeah. And I talked through it. While I was talking through it, he was making the changes that I wanted to change. And it was really helpful just to have that. Something that my husband brings a lot to my studies is proofreading. Yeah. I can't proofread for toffee, but he's so good at it because it's part of what he does for his work. Yeah. And he just goes, right, let's get the grammar right in this because the grammar's terrible. Yeah. I'm like, okay, let's go through and let's put the commas in, the apostrophes. I'm doing primary education. I'm terrible at grammar, which is not a good thing. Yeah. But actually seeing how he does it kind of makes more sense. Yeah. And that's been so helpful. Yeah. And it also gives us, it's a weird thing, almost gives us a date night working on proofreading. Yeah. But it's how we spend time together at the moment, is because he knows I've got to do this. Yeah. So if that's how we spend time together, that's how we spend time together. Yeah. But it's, it's only for a season. Yeah. End in May. It's fine.
So each of you have got your own sort of initiatives that you think about ways that would sit. And I guess if you don't have somebody who's an expert at proofreading, you could get something like Grammarly, or, there are ways around various things like that. Yeah. But sometimes one of the things we found interesting, actually, when we were planning for this session, was we were talking about how sometimes we can do OU things with the kids. Yes. And not everything needs this heightened sense of attention. So sometimes you'll be watching a video and the kids might come along and that might be fine. Sometimes you really need to think to get the gist of your argument, and then maybe you just need to be on your own. So it's about creating those parameters and having that flexibility, and also communicating that study looks like this or like this, but it's not always a place to come and watch videos with mummy.
No, exactly. And one of the things we were talking about was listening, creative ways of actually doing it. Yeah. So listening to podcasts in the gym and things like that. Yeah. And that I think is really helpful, so that when you are actually away from your family and doing something that's actually going to benefit you, going to the gym helps you think about things. I mean, one of the things I do is I take time out and go swimming to think about what I've just been studying. And I put my earpods in while I'm swimming, because I've got waterproof ones. Put my earpods in while I'm swimming and listen to stuff. And going to the gym and listening to stuff is really helpful, because it takes you out of it as well. So there's lots of different methods that we can use, and and showing our families that studying is quite varied, and there's lots of different ways to do it, and get them involved in it.
One of the things as well, it's, I think, personally important for students is that when I began studying at the OU, after I'd done my first degree, you have to be a vicious time manager with yourself. Yes, you really have to be. Yeah. And one of the things I used to do was, I think this links into the last session a little bit, when I was studying, for example, on my master's degrees, it was 16 hours study a week. So I set aside 16 hours. But then I found, actually, as the weeks went on, I was able to bring that time down, because I found there were some things I did that were more effective than others. Eventually, what I began doing was finding what I called non-disruptive time. Yeah. It's time when either people were sleeping or they weren't in the house, or I wasn't doing anything. And for me, disruptive time was 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So that's when it didn't matter what went on, unless something really bad happened, no one interrupted me.
Yeah.
And I was able to find that after a month or two of effectively managing what was good and bad about, what things I needed to do in the module, I was able to allocate my time into 4 hours, and I stuck to it every Sunday. Even if I was ahead, I'd go up and get ahead of the module materials and keep going at it.
So important to do that. So
really
important
is.
to sort of protect your study time.
You do.
And also with protecting your study time, protecting family time, protecting time with your friends, and actually I've got a date in my diary with my best friend, and we put a date in the diary every month, and that's protected time. But it doesn't interfere with my study time because it's a different time. But it means that I still get that relationship with my friends, and I still get that quality family time, and it's all quality. It's about quality at the moment rather than quantity. Whereas my study, it's definitely about quantity, but it's about getting that quality time with friends and family because it helps you switch off. And if you can switch off, when you go back to your studies, you're so much more effective. So it's so important to do all those things and keep up those relationships and not let those relationships fall by the way, because those are the people that are going to help you through. These are the people that you want up on the stage when you're graduating. These are the people you want with you. These are your support team. So it's important to keep those relationships going and protect those times as well.
So really, it seems like the take-home message is it's about fitting things in by scheduling things. And that's two things, it seems to me, what you're both saying. Is sometimes it might be large chunks like you've had, sometimes it might be smaller chunks, but they're sort of planned. And it sounds to me like sometimes, Kieran, you're saying your chunks are planned. You've got 4 hours. But Sarah, sometimes it sounds like you're saying, I'm going to do this in this amount of time. So you're perhaps having a plan with a purpose. And then that can be really good. Because sometimes I think when you're studying, if you think I should be studying and you don't really have a thing other than I must do 8 hours or 16 hours or whatever it is a week, you can think you should always be studying because you haven't penciled it in. So you don't know when you are. So you never feel happy because you're always feeling like you should be doing something else.
That's actually a really good point, Karen, because one of the main things is that in order to feel as if you've done something while studying, you have to have a feeling of achievement. And in order to have that feeling of achievement, I find, but this was just for me, I had to set aside time, even if it was time that I was already ahead of the game or I was a little bit behind. I forced myself to be highly productive in those 4 or 5 hours. Initially it was 8 hours, dropped it down to 6, then down to 4. And some weeks it had to go back update because the module materials were tougher. But it's recognising that and freeing yourself up. And it has been really, really strict with yourself about your time when it comes to that anyway.
Something I do, I've got a chalkboard that sits on my table and I write in when I'm studying, so that because weeks change, life happens, weeks change. So I write in so that my kids know this is the time I'm studying, this is the time I'm doing this, and they know then what's going on, so they can go, okay, Mummy, you should be studying, which is brilliant to have that. Mummy, you really should be studying. Yesterday morning, I got up slightly earlier than I anticipated. My son came in and went, Mummy, you need to get up and study. Because he knew that I needed to crack on with my TMA. So it's good to kind of have those people cheering you on and encouraging you when you kind of like really don't want to do this. But actually to have that really does help. Really helps.
That's brilliant. HJ and Joe, how's everyone at home? What do they think about studying and fitting things in?
I think it's tricky for some people, but they're listening to the tips and they're learning. We're all learning.
I think Charlie had a good point earlier as well that I picked up, that Charlie learned that you can't study properly at home, so trying different environments really helps. I was just saying that before I drove, I used to just whack out my phone or books on the bus and then just get a little bit on there, and I find it so much more useful to, instead of having like massive blocks of time where I study at home, fit it in while I'm on my way to work or just before I start work or things like that. And Kate's definitely a fan of podcasts as well as a way to get her study in, which is great. She's currently doing A111 and does recommend it as a great introductory module. And as we said earlier, Gemma does work nights, so while her children are in school, she's got that quiet time to study. And we really like Sarah's idea of having protected quality time with friends and family as well, as a way of keeping that balance with our work and our study and making sure we don't go overboard with everything and overdo ourselves.
Jo, can you tell us some more about people who are struggling with time? Because we had some workshops on Saturday, and some people were saying, I've got various disabilities, or I might be having an operation, or I might have something going on. What are people talking about at home, Jo, about how mentioned might be hard for people to put things in terms of time management?
I think it's really important, as I mentioned here, little and often. Little and often. Just so don't see it as a big task, like I have this 2,000 word essay. Just I will get 10 words written and then another 10 words, and just little and often. Don't put the pressure on yourselves, regardless of what else is going on.
And when your other role in the student support team, you deal with students who may declare disabilities or issues, and sometimes it might be something that's really temporary, like a bereavement, but it might have a massive impact on their study. And I guess it's this whole thing of predictability. Sometimes we can sort of plan time, but then all of a sudden the rug gets pulled from under us. What do students do then, Jo?
I think first and foremost, speak to your tutor. If you become behind, they will help you prioritise, and sometimes you just need a little extension. If need be, just a little extension to take the pressure off. If it's a temporary thing, it will pass, and you can catch up, but it is important to reach out. We don't know what's happening unless you tell us.
No, thank you. That's brilliant to know.
Totally agree with that. Contacting your tutor is the most important thing to do. I've just had an extension on one of my TMAs. Don't like doing it, but it was necessity because I'd just been really ill, and I knew that I didn't have the capacity to actually get it done in time. And my tutor was really supportive, really understanding, and encouraged me and helped me to prioritise. So yeah, I think that's just so important. So important. Yeah.
Definitely. No, that's important. One of the things as well, students will sometimes overlook, and I'm saying this as someone who is a student and undergraduate as well, look at your study calendar and you can see the choke points, and you know when things are going to get tight and when you're going to be busy. And
But for people who don't know,
for people that don't know.
for people who don't know, because we've got lots of new starters out there, we were asking people before in our time management session about whether they'd looked ahead, and some people said, I just can't bear to. I'm just sort of, some people had, but some people hadn't. But also I was just ruminating and thinking, choke points and stuff, how might you know? Like, I wouldn't necessarily know that TMA 6 is going to be much harder than TMA 1. Like, some students don't know that because they don't know it might be worth more marks because they don't know to look at certain things. How might you identify then where those choke points could be?
That's a brilliant question. There's a few ways you can do it. Generally, keep in mind that as a module progresses, the assignments are designed to become tougher, usually, because they expect that your study skill levels will rise with the level of difficulty. If you look at your assessment guides for your modules, you'll see the weighting of each assignment. So an assignment may have, for example,
the weighting means the amount of marks
that it's worth.
has.
So the first assignment might be worth 10%. The second assignment 30. The next one 30, and then 40 or something, and it adds up to 100. And the weightings will give you an indication of how much effort that you're supposed to put in, how much that assignment is worth. The other thing too is to be aware of what level you're studying, what you're trying to do. Level 1 is very much about orientating you towards a new way of studying, whereas level 2 and 3 counts towards the classification of your degree. Be aware, and the choke points too. Chat. It is okay to talk to your lecturer. If you actually chat to your lecturer, they'll probably do it in your sometimes do it in your tutorial. They'll lay out. There's 4 assignments. These are the dates. And right, it's going to take me 2 weeks to write that assignment. Block out time beforehand.
Yeah, I think that's really important to do. Really, really important. I've got an end of module assignment on both of my modules that I'm doing at the moment, and I've blocked out from mid-April all the way through to May to do nothing except occasional bits and bobs with my family. But that is my priority because both of those bits are worth 50% of my overall grade. So I know that I've got to work really hard and put lots and lots of effort into that. So I've really blocked out that time and gone, okay, I'm not doing anything. That's my priority then. And I think you really have to be very good at looking at the assessment guide, and don't be afraid to look forward. I know it's scary, but don't be afraid to look forward. It helps to look forward sometimes.
Because sometimes you can't get extensions on those final ones because that's when the module ends. And then if you've got a backlog of TMA 3 and 4 and they're both worth a lot, or 5 and 6 or whatever it is on the module, then it's a problem.
Also looking through the guide, you can see where you've got a break week, and that's sometimes, you're supposed to take a break, but actually sometimes that's a time that you can either catch up or you can get ahead.
Yeah.
You know, but don't put any pressure on to do it.
Yeah.
But that's something you can go, whew,
Yeah.
and then crack on again.
Yeah.
So just, you know, it is good to look ahead. It's scary,
Yeah.
but it is good to look ahead.
I had
Yeah.
some students yesterday saying, "Oh, somebody in my they'd set these Facebook groups up, and someone said, oh, they've already submitted their first 2 assignments already. Why are you sighing, Sarah?"
Because it puts so much pressure on other students. Sometimes these students are making it up
Yeah.
just because they want to sound good.
Yeah.
But actually, you know what? The best place to look for this kind of stuff is your tutor group forum, your module forum, all of those. Facebook groups aren't moderated by the OU anyway. They can be moderated by some students, but it's so out of the OU's control that they can't do anything about it. Sometimes students say stuff and you go, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Actually, ignore it. You're on your own journey. This is your journey. It isn't somebody else's journey. So take everything with a pinch of salt and crack on. Talk to your tutor if you're worried. They're the most important person you need to contact about these things.
And our next session's about tutors. So what's your final advice, Kieran?
Basically, just build on what Sarah said and some of the things you said, Karen. First things first, I would say that it's very easy. I think Facebook is like the corridors of a university. And what happens in the corridor is not what your lecturer has said should be taking place. So if you're getting advice from other students, my advice is come back into the OU systems and get advice from your tutor. Second thing, huge disadvantage of submitting 2 assignments at the same time, and this is from a time management perspective. When you get your first assignment back, your tutor will be giving you a lot of feedback.
That's right, absolutely.
And you need that feedback to develop and move forward.
Absolutely.
And you need that break between the two. So from a time management perspective, when you get your assignments back as well, leave time to look at the tutor's feedback.
Yes, really important.
If I'm on this point too, sometimes when someone's reading their feedback on a tablet, they can't see the comments the tutors write to the side because of the tablet device. So you have to be aware, even inside a Word document on a computer, you have to change the view so you can read the different advice. You need to manage your time effectively, you have to read that feedback.
Yeah, it's really important to get the feedback because that helps you build your academic skills. It helps you build on your essays and make them better. It's designed to actually make you a better student and to progress you in your studies. So it's so important to make time for that feedback.
Brilliant. Well, Sarah and Kieran, thank you so much. That's been brilliant. Speaking of feedback, Victoria says that was the best ever Adobe Connect session. What about this session, Victoria? Oh, and AJ and Joe, I see you've got some cake. We've got a very similar cake over here.
I'm sure you have.
Is this though?
No, this one I got somewhere else. But we just thought, as Victoria said earlier, brains need fueling. So we're just refueling, getting ready, and we're going through study tips while at it. So, we are being productive.
They're very large slices.
They are.
Could be bigger.
We're working hard, though.
you can never let some people be happy. We try so hard.
This is just the lunch cake, though. The dinner cake is much bigger.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, we have got the graduate school coming on. I mean, if you think that's a nice cake, we did have one here. We've got the graduate school coming along later doing a bake your research thing. Yeah, they got people to bake all of their research, and they've said they're going to bring some along, and I am going to be allowed to eat us. So I'm really excited about that. I'm more excited about that than the quiz, and I love the quiz so much. We've got a quiz on at 2:00, so stay tuned for that because that's heaps and heaps of fun. It's a multi-choice quiz, and I used to think everyone at home Googled the answers, but apparently they don't. They just see the answers slightly before we do. No, they don't. But I think there's some disadvantage going on anyway within that. But our next session is about making the most of your tutor. I've got 2 lovely tutors from our Access programme, Jenny and Debbie, who'll be joining me. And then we're going to talk about learning and caring for others before our quiz. So stay tuned. We're just going to show you a quick video break, and then we'll be back for that next session. See you then.